same. I'm on the internet in general, and if you just put that into Google, you can find most things. Is that working? Yes, it is. Okay, so I sort of want to talk to you today about the city. And there were lots of different images I think I could have chosen to represent the city to you, probably buildings or traffic and skyscrapers, that kind of thing. But this image here is much more about the idea of the city I want to talk to you about today. Sometimes I like to imagine were a city an organism, what would humans be like to it? Would be like ghosts? Or like electrical impulses that run through its synapses in the same way as I raise a hand that raise bridges and buildings to the sky. Which is the reason I've gone with this image. That's sort of a beginning feeling to what I'm going to be talking about. There's a proviso too. I'm talking today about the city, but I'm not talking about everyone's city. The cities I'm talking about today are primarily developed world cities, highly networked, have the infrastructure. There are an awful lot of cities in the world that are not like that. The experience of living in Delhi is very different to the experience of living in London. So primarily developed world, although that's not to say that technology doesn't persist in the developing world, and that's not to say that poverty doesn't exist in the developed. But I just wanted to sort of let you know that I'm aware of all of the different sort of experiences that there are out there, but this is the one that I'm talking about today. So we'll go forwards, hopefully. I think I have to come over here to make this thing work. Yes, okay, so it's always useful to know, I think, where the person who's talking to you is coming from, and this is very literally where I come from. Up there, Hayington, so a little dot up there, in the county of Lincolnshire. Things you might like to know about Lincolnshire, second largest and second least populated county in England. This is what it looks like in satellite view. Pretty green. Basically fields. I used to walk about half an hour to school across fields every day. Yeah, this is another interesting fact. No dual carriageways until about 10 years ago. No motorways at all. So it's a very rural place. That's what I'm trying to get across to you. The two main exports that Lincolnshire has as a county, the most well-known is Thatcher, and the most ubiquitous is cabbage. That's where I'm coming from. Why am I talking to you about a city? Why am I talking to you about the cities? Cities really fascinate me, and I think they're really important. I'll tell you why they fascinate me, because I fucking love people. People and the amazing, ridiculous, terrible, horrible, exciting things that they do. And when you bring them together, they do more of those things, more excitingly. Cities are a place of passing, a place where people amass, where they rise up. And that's what excites me about cities. But also my experience of growing up along the cabbages is quite an unusual one. There is, let me find the stats. This is why I have this, so I get the stats correct. The World Resources Institute did a study recently. 90% of the UK live in urban areas. So I'm 1 in 10 that I grew up in a rural area. And this is the global picture here. It was last year that we tipped over to more people in the world living in urban space than rural space. So living in cities is more and more a global experience. Like I said at the beginning, not the same experience, but city living is certainly. Every time I look down, it gets extremely loud, so I'm going to try and stretch up slightly. Particularly in light of this TEDx event, I thought I'd talk about cities and how technology is changing them. And it is. In the same way as the last steam age changed the way that we move and operate and exist in cities, so too is this new steam age that sort of Marcus has brought on as a theme. So I think if you were to ask for someone to come up with a sort of ubiquitous and malevolent example of technology in our cities, they'd talk about CCTV cameras. But actually there's a much more ubiquitous surveillance device in our cities. There are 3 of these devices for every 1 person in the UK. They can communicate your location to within a couple of meters. They can take images, they can take video, audio, and if this is transmitted through the cellular networks which enable these devices to communicate, then under the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, the police can requisition this data without communicating the person from whom it originated. I think probably I've laboured that quite a lot and you realise that I'm talking about the mobile phone. we're increasingly living in a networked age, and our cities are increasingly networked, built up out of nodes. And I would argue that there are 3 types of nodes. Click, click, click. Private, personal, and public. So your private nodes are the weather towers that belong to B-Sky-B. The personal nodes are the mobile phones in your pocket, and the public nodes are the CCTV cameras that belong to the council, or red light detectors, or gunshot detectors, which triangulate the source, the originating point of a gunshot, and send the police to that location within minutes. So this technology is changing how we exist in our cities. A very simple example of that is now how people walk through a city. Do they hear everyone around them anymore, or do they wear their headphones and sort of not feel exactly in the same places of everyone as they would do if they could hear what was going on around them? I personally rarely walk around a new city without having a map in my hand as I walk. I'm not saying that these are bad uses of technology, but they are changing how we exist in our cities. And our cities are also being shaped by private technologies. This is a billboard. I think it was, I don't know where it's from, actually. It's from Flickr. But it's an interactive billboard. And what it does is that it takes the video feed of the people on the ground and it puts them onto the billboard and sort of applies kind of advertising things to them. And it's all well and good. I guess you can choose whether or not you want to be a part of that advert when you walk into that space. You can walk out of it. But Adam Greenfield, who speaks really eloquently and interestingly on technology and the city space, and you should check him out, he highlighted in a recent talk a couple of other uses of this kind of technology. There's a kind of billboard technology that is a secret camera, and it tracks how long and who is paying attention to that billboard. Now that's a shift there. You're getting data taken away from you in a public space, but you're not consenting to that necessarily, apart from being in the public space. And there's a step further. There's a vending machine, an interactive vending machine, and you walk up to it and you scroll through, and it presents you with certain options, and you can see more as you scroll. As you walk up to it, it takes measurements. It takes your height, it takes your weight, it makes a guess about your gender, and presents you with options as you walk up to it. Personalization, it's all well and good. It's kind of nice, it can make things quicker, but I'm not sure I want to live in a world where there is such a thing as a girl's drink. It's the primary reason I took up drinking whiskey. So it makes me nervous. And as public technology is sort of personal technology is shaping how we move, so is private. I think a perfect way to describe advertising is the attempt to change how we move and interact in our cities, to infiltrate our cities with stories of what they want us to be. As Warren Ellis says, we're giving the gift of the digital city to our ruling classes. Adam Greenfield said this very well over about 3 minutes, but he put that on his blog, and that sort of summed it up, I think. It depends who you want to be your ruling classes there. Are they the government, or are they the media? Are they advertising, that kind of thing? And Warren Ellis, he talks about USB dead drops as sort of an interesting way to infiltrate the city, kind of file sharing. You walk up, you plug your computer in, you leave, physical file sharing. But he makes the point that in physical space, the bureaucracy is already there. All of the machine is already there to take you down. But the digital space is a new space. And he argues, he says, fly posting is illegal, Google Map pins are not. And he calls for a digital sandpaper, a layer on top of the city to wear down what's there that we don't want. There's a guy called Infovore. His real name's Tom Armitage, but if you Google Infovore, you'll find him. He talks about the instrumented city, and this is a really good example of what he means by the instrumented city. He had a Twitter bot. I hope this is Tower Bridge. Not being a Londoner, I could have just got a really badly labelled Flickr picture and embarrassed myself. But hopefully this is London Bridge. And he created a little tweet bot that scraped the data from the London Bridge when it was raising, what it was going to let go underneath it. And he turned this into a little sweet personified bot. It would say, I'm raising now to let so-and-so boat go underneath me. He instrumented a very small part of people's daily experience of the city. And it was useful. In small ways, if you checked Twitter as you were leaving and you needed to get across the river, if you went in a different way because you'd seen that it was lifting, your day was very slightly improved. Tom had this tweet bot taken away from him. He got one email, no method of recourse. Twitter took it and gave it to the private interest, the museum, the sort of Tower of London Museum, and they now run it as a very dull corporate account. This is what Tom said about that. He said, the frustrations that you see in the real city are coming to the instrumented city, and this highlights an interesting set of problems if you're designing that instrumented city. I want to sort of take you from there to actually who do we want designing our instrumented city? Whose streets are these? If you've been to a protest ever, that's a shout. Whose streets? Our streets. That's what you say as you walk down the streets, which are closed. There's no cars on the road because it's all been pedestrianised. All the shops are closed, and there are thousands of us and maybe 2 or 3 police officers. And what can they do until they kettle you? And there's something there about walled gardens. Do we want our digital city to be made up out of walled gardens in the same way that our real city is being made up of private interests and walled gardens? This is a quote from Adam Greenfield, who I talked to you about pretty much earlier on. We can reutilise, repurpose and revivify the spaces of our cities in ways that are responsive to our own needs, in ways that make us not consumers of the city, but co-constituents of it in real time. And this is where I move from the city to art. As technology becomes more pervasive and integral, I think that the body is where data is being taken from us, but the body is also the place where we can regain control. Augusto Boal, he talked about the theatre of the oppressed. This is a quote from him. He believes that the body is one's most essential tool in transforming and altering everyday space. I think the body is the site where we can rewrite the basic programming of our city. And art is a tool extremely well placed to do so because, and this is another quote, it's a revolutionary practice that relies as much on imagining and mobilizing better stories as on shocks to the system. Imagining and mobilizing better stories. What a brilliant, brilliant description of art in general. So, art in the city. Click. Graffiti grows on our city's walls like moss. It understands the city as a material. Art needs to do this with technology as well. Forget the cultural quarter, which is a cage for culture as far as I'm concerned. Think haunting. Think augmenting the city with art. Why art? Because we need better stories to rival some of these more dangerous ones. This is a quote from Graham Miller. It's a long one, but stay with it because it's definitely worth it. We live at a time when people increasingly express the feeling that the world outside our windows is a dangerous and fragmented place. Once upon a time, people walked through the city and it gave them a chance to name places and make contact with each other. Humans need to mark their lives against a real space and other people. When they cease to walk, the real spaces become less plausible than the centralized reality of the media. So this, I'm afraid, is a call to artists, technologists, citizens, to give people the tools of imagining and mobilizing better stories. And here are 3 really quick examples, very quick examples, of how that's being done now. This is an image done by an artist called Nikki Pugh. She's taken 2 GPS sensors and she's walked out and she's taken the 2 measurements that they give and made them into a line. As it gets more built up, as there's more interference, the line gets larger. It's a really interesting topography of a city from a built-up point of view, and she's making these devices, these kind of creatures that people can carry around a city and sort of interact with the space in a really interesting way. So she's sort of using walking there. This is an image I took from a subtle mob, Duncan Speakman's subtle mobs, which you download a track, you take it out onto the streets, you play it, and suddenly you're part of a slightly different world, a story that you walk through, that you're at the center of, where meaning is suddenly enhanced as if someone had turned up the contrast. So he sort of haunts the city with stories, walking, haunting. And my third example for you is Slung Low's Mapping the City. Alan Lane is in the audience somewhere, and we'll be talking to you later on. This is not only an excellent piece of art, it's one of my favorite experiences ever. What it did was it remade the city of Hull. It remade it. Alan talks about magical realism, and that's exactly what it was. It wove a fabric of time, space, people, and place into the city that was entirely forgotten in most people's lives, but entirely underlays every moment of our lives. And these examples, they use technology, but they don't use it as a tool. They put a body at the center of it, and they create a spectre. If I could return to the sort of STEAM theme, art and technology should be like taking water and heat and producing something fundamentally different. Too often the arts look at technology as a tool, not as a material, and as long as they do, they won't truly be able to work with it. The arts need to embed themselves in the real world like a virus, like a benevolent virus, haunting the city with visions of what it might be and of how we, not private interests, might use the city and its technology. Thank you.